I think the speech as well was beautifully crafted and forcefully delivered, calling on Americans to embrace what Obama called a new era of responsibility. Responsibility for one another, for our communities, for our economy, for our planet. Now, this notion of responsibility, which Mike touched on as well, this is not a new theme. President Clinton, as some of you may remember, talked about opportunity, responsibility, and community. And President Bush as well, in his inaugural, talked about the importance of responsibility. But I do think President Obama put a sharper edge on it in his remarks yesterday, that previous presidents had spoken of responsibility more in a sense of our responsibilities to one another, volunteering in our communities, being our brother's keeper, and so on, whereas I think the message yesterday was more about acting like grown-ups. And I think the whole demeanor that President Obama himself took there on the podium and the tone of his remarks was reinforcing that kind of responsibility. It was sober in tone. It didn't try to minimize any of the challenges ahead, but it did offer us a sense of real purpose and confidence and vision that was anchored in perhaps prosaic specifics: roads and bridges, electric grids and digital lines, cars and factories, schools and universities, restoring science to its rightful place. On foreign policy, we already knew that President Obama had a very sympathetic audience in the wider world, where voters, where citizens had indicated that could they have voted in our election, his victory would have been even more overwhelming. And recent polls have shown that optimism that U.S. relations with the world are going to improve under President Obama's tenure. I was struck that almost a quarter of this speech was directed at audiences, explicitly directed at audiences beyond our borders. And in President Clinton's second inaugural, which is when I was in the White House, that was the inaugural address that I was there for, there was really only about a paragraph that was explicitly directed to the world. And I think in President Bush's first, about that much, although the second obviously was very, very different. Even though there were only a few really explicit references to change, I did feel that the subtext of change came through pretty clearly in the foreign policy section, and that there was a fairly clear rejection of past policy.